Okay, all started? That's not the way I thought this was going to go, but howdy, I'm your host, Nate Shear, and welcome to the show. This is Mind Force, the podcast for love, life, and learning, where your mind matters. Today, I have Seat 41 Alpha, the whole trio. Chuck Taylor is back from deployment. Manoj has moved. There's a lot of things going on, but we're hanging out. We're doing some fun things. So let's introduce the guest around the horn. We'll start with Christopher. Tell us who you are, what you're up to, and why you're here.
I'm Chris, one of the co-hosts for the Seat 41A podcast. I'm not really up to much. Getting ready for a PCS coming up, playing a lot of golf, and I'm here just to have some fun and enjoy the conversation.
Perfect. Greg?
Hey everybody, I'm Greg, also known as Chuck. I am still trying to reacclimate myself to my original life, which continues to be strange. And I've been back for about 3 weeks, although one of those weeks didn't really count because I went TDY before I even checked back in from deployment. That was a bit strange, a bit unorthodox, but it was for a good cause. So yeah, excited to be back in the same time zone as the rest of my mates here and ready to get after it. Although, Nate, you went the opposite direction.
I sure did.
While I was
in
over
the UK.
in the Middle East and now in the UK at our old stomping grounds, the Lakenheath Mildenhall area, which I know we all miss a lot.
Oh, Bridge Farm close. Manoj, what are you up to?
Reba? No. I'm currently doing an AFIT at Syracuse University, and what I'm up to is homework, which is something I definitely did not miss, especially 2 versions of accounting, and I've never taken an accounting class in my life, so taking a grad level accounting class has been fun, but not really. Yeah, just ready to have a great conversation with y'all.
How are things going with the orchestra?
So something I have to dip out later for is I'm volunteering with the Syracuse Orchestra and the Syracuse Youth Orchestra. Sadly, I'm not playing this time around. I would love to be playing with them, but I'm just going to be scanning tickets as people walk in today. But hopefully this is my first gig with them, so hopefully get my foot in the door and I can keep volunteering with them because I do have a volunteer requirement for this program, interestingly enough. But I honestly would have done this even if it wasn't for the volunteer hours. I just enjoy local orchestras. They're a lot of fun.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, we're going to move into the warm-up with the unpopular opinion. So the first one is, there's a booming industry around self-help and personal development. What's your unpopular opinion on the effectiveness of popular self-help advice or trends? Are there aspects you believe are completely overrated or potentially counterproductive?
I think I'll take the first hack at this one. It's a really good question. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that just repeats things over and over. Just seems like you get maybe a slightly different flavor of stuff that's out there. So it's really hard to kind of filter out some of the noise. And like, how are you supposed to, a book can get a lot of marketing, right? And then you wind up reading it and then it really just like doesn't live up to, and I think we've had a couple of those books that we've read or featured on our podcast. It just doesn't live up to the hype, or it's, reframing some things that, you hear quite a bit. But there is some really good stuff in the self-help arena, but it feels like lately the majority of the stuff, and maybe that's just because, as you read so much of it, it just all kind of starts to sound very similar.
I think one thing that's really interesting is we want to make cookie cutter approaches for so many things, and humans are so complex. We are just, vastly complex and difficult, and we have highs and lows and things like that. And so I think we want these, roadmaps that go A, B, C, and, if you follow this checklist, especially us being in the Air Force and we do like, the pilots and things like that, like checklists. And I think even the civilian world wants to move through these things. Like if you do these things, you'll have a good organization. And it's just not the way it is. There has to be more approaches to things. And I think that's too difficult to put in a book. You can't have this scattered roadmap of different approaches. But yeah. Greg, what are your thoughts?
I was going to agree with Chris, but I do have a counterpoint to that. So you said, like, they're kind of the same thing being said in different ways. But my counterpoint to that is sometimes I will gather that information a little better from one person than another person trying to reiterate the same thing. Their approach might not be the right way if they're just, I mean, this is an extreme example, but if they're yelling at me, trying to motivate me, okay, yeah, not the right way. But then if you talk to me like Simon Sinek, okay, I'm gonna understand it better that way. So same information, two different approaches. I think that might be a way to reach people that might, like you said, humans are very complex. We can't have that one roadmap. So we might need to hear the same thing in 20 different ways from 20 different people. And maybe one or two people will hear what's supposed to be heard and change their ways for the better. So I kind of like it where we're getting repetitive, because even also half these self-help things, practice makes perfect. So if I hear it a bunch of times, and I get reminded to keep doing that, and just instead of hearing it one time from one person and go forth and do it for the rest of my life, if I hear it multiple times throughout my life, throughout the year, maybe it'll stick a little better. So.
Makes sense.
That was, Manoj's response there, I think, is what I was largely going to go with. So since this is unpopular opinion, my unpopular opinion with it is I think that the entire self-help industry is a net positive. And my reason for that thinking kind of hits at what Manoj said, and what you said, Nate, the tapestry that is the human experience is it's widely varied in the lens with which we look at the world, our lived experiences, things like that. And different people's messages hit differently, even if they're saying largely the same thing. Is a lot of what's in a self-help book repackaged material? Yep. I don't think that matters as much. I think one who sees those offerings that way should instead go into looking at the self-help section less as like, hey, am I going to learn something new, and maybe am I going to see something that I already know about but in a different light? I think you might come into it with a more positive or optimistic interaction then in that material, and that, hey, a lot of people sell those self-help things as like, hey, this is what worked for me, or this is how I frame our, communication, like some sort of communication framework for talking with people, like, well, you have like executive conversation, and you have limbic conversation, and whatever other like random apply a thing, like everyone's either a captain or a seaman in the ship, and you have to be able to talk to both, or whatever the analogy is there. I don't know, Chris, did that last bit resonate with you at all? Or
no, I'm going to say no. We're going with no.
Okay. I'll keep working. I'll keep working on him. Perhaps if I can work in the word Commodore in some sort of natural context, maybe that'll.
I think it goes to the other side too, as well, though. Like I was talking about the different people being complex and things like that, but as the leader or the person that's delivering the self-help advice, I think we all deliver things differently. So even though it worked for that one person, so kind of going exactly what you were talking about, if I deliver something, and you deliver something, it could be exactly the same thing from the exact same book, but it's not going to hit the same. We're completely different, and our delivery and how that works, like we talk about communication and tone of voice and things like that. You can say the exact same words, right? But the tone of voice that comes through. So that is probably, a net positive. I think I'd have to agree with you, because, you try different things and you see how they work, but, you could do the exact same thing as someone else and it's going to come out different. So I think that plays even more into the humans being just very complex.
It's that old man wisdom voice. Like, it really just hits differently. Like, here, that's the truth. That's not even a joke. That's the truth.
So the next question I have for you guys, the concept of work-life balance is often portrayed as a universal goal. Everybody wants this work-life balance. What's your unpopular opinion on work-life balance? Is it an achievable goal? Is this ideal for everyone, or do you believe it's time to rethink this narrative?
So I'm going to go again first. Looks like Greg and Manoj are on the fence for answering this one. Yeah, this one's kind of tough for me, to be honest, because I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to work-life balance, because there's some days where I think I really believe that a work-life balance is achievable as long as you are deliberate and disciplined about keeping that and maintaining those boundaries, because that's really kind of what it comes down to. And that can be really difficult, especially when, those times of the year where we have a lot of stuff coming at us. And I'll just, think of that purely from our career field, specifically. You have demands that are just coming at us regularly. Deadlines seem to loom and kind of all crash together. And during those times, it's really difficult to get that work-life balance. And even if you're, like me, where I'm intentional and deliberate about, hey, it's 4:30, I'm turning this off, doesn't matter. Like, we'll get to this again tomorrow or Monday. It can be difficult to turn that off, though, even in like after hours, right? Because you're still kind of thinking about some of those things that you have to do. So I think it is achievable in that sense, but I also think it is not achievable sometimes in the type of work that we do. And there are some things we just can't say no to. Sometimes things come down that have to be done that conflict, right? Maybe I get a task here from DHA, or something happens from, it happens to come in at the same time as a tasker from the group or the wing. And those two things just, butt up against each other, and we're required to put some things aside or maybe work some extra hours. I will say, though, that it does feel like at least leadership at the local level understands that. And maybe I've been super fortunate that whenever we communicate that to them, like, hey, I've got these two things. I also have this personal thing that I have to do. Like, I can't get to this until tomorrow. And it's like, hey, yep, totally understand. Get it to me first thing, or get it to me by this time, no later than this time on the next day. And so I think there is room for it as long as you're kind of communicating that, but it certainly can feel overwhelming. I hope that makes sense.
I think the biggest challenge I have with it is the terminology, and maybe it's nuances, and maybe I shouldn't think about it too much, but I think words matter, right? And I think balance is one of those things that always frustrates me, because I always think of Lady Justice or, whatever, and those scales that are tipping, and they're supposed to balance out. So if the term was integration, or, fill in some other verb or whatever fits right there. But balance, it just never seems to make sense to me. I think that, like you said, we should be able to go and run an errand on a slower day and then stay later on the day that we need to. But I don't know if I'd consider that balance as much integration.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I let's put it this way. I don't think work-life balance is ever achievable, period. Because of the word balance, though, like you said, I think it may be probably a better sophisticated word, but maybe average, work-life average. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to have perfect 8-hour life day and 8-hour work day. It's never going to happen. You're going to have those days where you can go home early, even pick up the kids early from school or something, or there's going to be days you're going to stay till 6. It's never possible to do both exactly. Let's make it simple, 100 days straight. It's never going to happen, you having those perfect days. You're going to go this way sometimes, you're going to go that way sometimes. And law of averages, as it happens throughout your entire career or life or day or week or month, it's just going to sit here as the average. So it's like a work-life average. I know it doesn't roll off the tongue as easily, but I think that's the way I see it. There's just some days it's not going to be there for you, and some days, and then it's also your priorities. What do you want your priorities that week or that day to be? They need to be at work. They need to be at work, and if they need to be at home, they need to be at home. And that's just the way it is. So balance on a singular level is definitely difficult. But if I think average throughout the whole assignment that I'm at, then I think that's more achievable.
And I think it's one of those things you have to look at perspective, and maybe it's trying to justify it or whatnot. But I try to think of like the flight line or something like that. Some of those people are sitting on the flight line for like 12 hours, and they're not able to break away and run an errand or pick the kids up early. They're held to a much stricter schedule. So even when we do stay late or do some of those smaller things, like I try to think of what that would be like for security forces or things like that. Maybe that is just justifying it, but I think the ability to go and run errands and things during the day almost, I hate to go back to, the scale, but almost weighs it out. What do you think, Chuck?
Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm glad you all went first so I can just pick at the things that you said instead of forming my own opinion. Just kidding.
Chuck's going first that time.
I do have an opinion. All right. So obviously work-life balance, that phrase has been talked about for a long time. And I've had many people bring it up to me at one point in time or another. And my response of late with that question, usually I turn it right around into another question as like, well, what's your goal that you're trying to achieve when you're using the phrase work-life balance? Is it because you don't feel like you're spending enough time on things that matter, or that you don't have the freedom of choice? Like your example, Nate, about the generic flight line worker who's unable to just pop over to Starbucks and recaffeinate as needed, like some of us in the hospital. And then, how I talk about the idea of work-life balance, really just work off of what their, operating definition or what their goal is that they're really looking for. So how I see it is that work-life balance is really an attempt to impose like value-based decision-making in your life. And I lean on a lot of my advice and a lot of my practice of what I do on the book First Things First by Stephen Covey, which really just comes down to, trying to spend time studying, like, what is it that you value? What is important to you in your life? A corollary question might be, mission first, people always. How do you reconcile that? Right? Because you can't, they're at times opposed to each other, right? And so you can't do both. So which one do you do? Well, depends is, of course, the answer to that question. But when it comes to things that throw what feels like work-life balance out of kilter is when you're either choosing or you're unable to choose and more forced to do things that don't align properly with your values. And so what I want to do in those situations for people who feel like they're struggling with work-life balance is I want to suggest to them, hey, take a few steps back and really think about, what is it that you want to do with your life? What are the actions that you can complete that will mean something to you? And then build up from there in how can I make sure that I'm making those deliberate decisions and those deliberate actions part of my everyday experience so that I'm getting fulfillment from the things that I do. Am I going to get fulfillment from everything that I do? No. I fill my cup by submitting Demer's iTime cards and by critiquing the time allocations of the people in my flight.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have today.
Not everybody does. Excuse me. I have the floor. Yeah. I have the floor. Anyway, everything you do isn't going to fill your cup, so to speak. But the times when the actions that you take and the achievements that you are able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Accumulate these achievements and they're things that align with your values, right? It helps you to put up with the BS that detracts from that work-life balance. So that's where I lean, at least as my starting frame point when we talk about, is work-life balance achievable? Well, do you know what your values are? Because I would say if you don't know what your values are, then no, work-life balance is not achievable because you have no idea if what you're doing is supporting or detracting from that balance. All right, I yield the rest of my time.
That makes sense. It's interesting. I just saw on somewhere someone was asking if they should join the medical service corps as a single parent. And someone had jumped on there and said it was extremely difficult. And just made me think of this situation where I think it's all about what you want out of it. I think that's kind of the core of what you were saying, Greg. I've seen some people 7:30 to 4:30 and maintain pretty strong to that. They have their goals and, the things they want to do, which is to take care of the kids and do certain things. And that's core to their being. And other people that, work 6 to 6. So it's really a wide range. It's just what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to get after. Is work more important or things like that? So yeah, I think that's a good point. If you don't know what you're going after, how are you trying to achieve it? So Greg,
I was
ahead.
just going to say, Greg had me right up until he said Dimmersai. I was following right along.
Just awful.
Lost. I think he's going to lose a lot of people.
Oh.
I'm glad that we can celebrate our differences. I think that's important. It's
they say it's for manpower, yet I've been in multiple other career fields that have manning, and somehow people keep showing up without time cards. So it's kind of interesting.
Go figure.
But anyway, Greg, over to you. So at this point, I've never had 3 people on the show, so I have no idea how this is going to work. But one question for me.
All right. It's a bit nonsensical, but that's kind of part of my brand, I guess. If you were going to be reborn, but you only could have one arm and 2 legs, or 2 arms and 1 leg, which would you choose? And as a footnote to that question, you cannot operate on the assumption that at the time when you're reborn, any sort of advanced prosthetics or robotics are going to exist. Maybe they will, but maybe they won't. You don't know. You don't know when on the timeline you will be born. So, if you're going with I'll just pick 1 leg because I'm going to get one of those cool Blade Runner legs, and then I can actually compete in the Olympics with that. You can't reside on, or you're not going to be reborn necessarily in the current time that you're in now. Okay, over to you.
Okay, I would definitely go with 2 legs and 1 hand. It would make things more challenging, opening jars and doing some of those things. But I think the ability to move around and be able to take care of myself would outweigh the minor inconveniences with the 1 arm. I think having to rely, like you said, I'm not sure at what given time this takes place. Having to rely on other people at some points at time in the past, people were not very kind. Didn't take care of each other very well. So I'd at least be able to get around and get to the market or do something. So I'm definitely going with 2 legs. Christopher, what's your question?
Man, you're really putting us on the spot here. I have 2 that I think I could ask. I think I'm going to go with the more challenging one, and it's okay if you have to maybe stop and think about it for a minute. So if you could create a council, like an advisory council for yourself, So whenever you have, it doesn't matter, work decisions, life decisions, but you could call on these 5 people at any point. Who would those 5 people be? And they can be alive, dead. It could be anybody. You can have anybody on your council.
Any 5 people ever? Oh, shoot. I do not know. Manoj, what's your question?
Mine's not terribly far off, but it is a little different. So mine was going to be, if you could pick one fictional character to mentor you in leadership, who would it be?
Fictional character. Okay, dang, I'm stuck between both of these. I don't read enough. I think for the 5...
Yeah, so we could...
movies.
I suppose we could amend my question. You could add fictional characters to it.
Yeah.
Ooh, fictional. Okay.
I'll think of another one. Just add that to Chris's. Yeah.
Okay. I think you got to go somehow get well-rounded, right? So you got to have like finances. You got to have, good political, good. Oh, shoot. I'm going to go with Kobe Bryant for the drive and determination to do anything because that dude was an absolute beast. I'm going to end up doing all sports, which is not what I want to do because I was going to say Tiger. I think just another like motivation and drive to be able to get things done. Because I think drive and motivation will get through a lot of different stuff. I mean, it would be nice. Warren Buffett will take him for financial. So that's 3. I need more like wise of the world. Gandhi, go with him. And oh, geez. Jesus Christ. There's
Jesus?
the
Are you
5.
saying
Living the best
not
life
Jesus.
right there. Jesus. Oh, for yours?
No, you said,
boy.
Jesus Christ. I
That's
thought,
my
like,
5.
that was it. Okay.
Jesus Christ. There you go. That's the 5. Right? Best life? I'm going with that. That's determination, willpower, a little bit of finances, being nice to other people, and leading a wholesome and holy life. Boom.
It's a great counsel. It really is. And that's the fun thing about this. And I forgot where I heard about this idea before about like keep an advisory council, right? And so we can kind of learn from some of those folks, but through books and historical documents, and you can draw from those lessons. And you can like add and remove from your council as the seasons of your life come and go.
So I'm going to write those down. Let you know as they shift. Manoj, what do you got?
Okay, that's the first one. And if you want to skip it, there's a second one.
Okay.
So, first one is, what is a common leadership rule or like, common thing leaders are supposed to do that you love to break? And what?
Love to break. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think as a whole, I like to challenge authority, which is probably something I'm not supposed to say out loud. But that's always just been kind of how I've driven. If something is difficult or dumb, like I have to kind of go against it. And I think that plays well into what we do, being problem solvers and making things better throughout the clinics and things like that. So I hope, not bucking the system just to buck it, but at least pausing to stop and reflect and like, does that actually make sense? Is that the best course of action? Like one example I'll use because I love stories. One of my MDSS commanders went over to the MPF and she was trying to check in at the kiosk, and the kiosk wasn't working to get checked in for her CAT card or whatever a service it was at the MPF. And an airman came over and said, "Oh, it never works." If it never works, let's figure out then sign in on paper or get rid of the kiosk or, work through that thing. It's kind of comical that the automatic response is like, "Oh, it never works." And why are we still doing it? Like if the thing doesn't connect to the internet or whatever the particular problem is,
where's the
let's
applause
go against
track?
that.
Where's the applause track? It needs to be thrown in right now.
Sorry, I'm over here dying because I can't tell you how many times we'll go to a section and like, "Hey, what is this?" And like, "Oh, I don't know. That's just this thing. That's this computer that's been there. It's never worked." And like, you never thought to put a ticket in to have it fixed. Like we never thought to like bring this up. Like what was the original function of this device? Like, yeah, it's crazy how often we do that.
That is wild. Well, thank you for the questions. I've never taken 3 at once. Hopefully that was pretty good. We'll shift over to mental fitness, the core of this podcast. So I'd love to ask you guys in the realm of mental fitness, what are the key factors that contribute to a person's overall well-being?
Work-life balance. Sorry.
Dang, you took my...
Yes. I was almost certain Greg was going to jump on that one, but okay. That was not my answer, by the way. I was just trying to be...
His button is stuck.
Yeah.
I was pondering the question.
So I'd like a 2-part answer, if that's possible. One, your personal feeling, and then all of us have led flights. What have you heard or, airmen have said is the core to their mental fitness? So both you and the members of your flights, or maybe it's the same.
So for me personally, it's really about having deliberate time for activities that recharge my batteries. So doing things that, for me, what that can be is usually it's either reading, having that 1 hour in the morning. I try to get up super early and read a book. Sometimes when that's not working for me, then it's usually working out. And then obviously playing golf is like the number one thing, like just being outside, no technology around me.
You need mental fitness just to play golf, okay? That's all other like lame.
You really do. But there is an aspect of like resiliency to it, because I don't know, I really feel like the game itself is just so representative of life in general. So I feel like that kind of helps me build some mental resiliency as well. As far as like within the work center and what I've heard people, I feel like it's pretty similar. And I feel like people usually say that, that just having a good support system or activities outside of work that really fill their cup is what's important. I think I really do think like your mental wellness though is really, it's going to be much stronger the stronger your social connections are. And that's hard for me to say as an introvert. But it's true, like having those people that you can really rely on, but then also making sure that you're taking care of yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're of no use to anybody else.
Great. I'll jump in with another one. I'm trying to think exactly how to put this out in there, but one of the keys for me is I need to maintain some level of emotional investment in the people around me. Because I think in a lot of ways, the digital world and the anonymity of a global information space, right, encourages us to maybe lose a little bit of our humanity. And an example of that might be something that you hear often where, the people act in a way incongruous to their personality online. They act one way online, but then in person, they're the sweetest thing, but then they can spew like some really nasty stuff online, or maybe cyberbully or whatever, right? And anyway, so it's a difficult world, and one of the ways that I try to fight against those challenges is by, being willing to be vulnerable a bit with other people by emotionally investing in that relationship. And knowing that you're not going, I'm not going to get hurt, emotionally speaking, by somebody if I don't care for them in one way, shape, or form at all. If I'm completely apathetic to their existence, right? They can't hurt me. And so it's a way to like kind of stay safe, but it's also a way to not experience anything of value or, like the richness of human interaction. And so I force myself to, care about other people, even if it's maybe not necessarily something that I want to do, because I believe that that investment, it will pay off in, rich human connection over time. And that is an experience that, from a mental fitness standpoint is important. The less isolating my behavior, the better it is for me. Then to the second part, this is, I think the thing that I would say is just a little bit different than what's been said thus far is about, I don't think that we remember the work, over time, achieving, 98% on a blah, blah, blah inspection or whatever. Right. But we remember like the team that we worked with and how they made us feel. And so just kind of along the lines of, making yourself emotionally vulnerable with other people around you is also cultivating and being part of a team that cares about one another is something that, can make an assignment. So those would be the things that I would add to that conversation.
Yes. So I was trying to think about it while Chris and Greg were answering, and I think the key word that you said is, fitness. So, and I'll preface this that I only had this epiphany about myself like recently, like last 18 months or so. But I think of fitness, I'm thinking like I have to keep challenging it. Like it's like working out. If you keep doing, 5-pound weights, like what are you really working? You have to like push and get harder and actually, lack of a better word or phrase, suffer a little bit and get injured to actually get stronger. So when you think fitness, mental fitness, I feel like I have to, subconsciously, I feel like I have to put myself through those tough situations in order to have my mind be fitter for, So I don't think I purposely do it, but it only hit me recently that these tough situations that you come across at work or even like now at school here, like, I don't know, maybe I'm unconsciously looking for them or they're just being attracted to me or I'm going out, and finding them because I want to put myself through that struggle a little bit so I can be a better person later and down the road, be more fit mentally down the road. If I don't put myself in those situations, I don't think I'm getting stronger mentally. So putting myself in a situation at the time really, really sucks. But I do have this lingering thought in the back of my head that's going, this will somehow make me better later. I don't know how yet. I don't know why, but I know it will. Whether for the good or the bad, somehow it's going to make me better down the line. So, like I said, I only realized this recently that I feel like these situations, and maybe other MSCs are going through this too. Like me, I like solving problems, but then that quote unquote drama comes up or that situation comes up where you're not getting your way or you gotta do more dimmer's eye time cards. I don't know. It's just painful and you don't know why you're doing this, but for some reason I'm going through it now. I have to get through it now. Let me tough it out like a workout, get through it, and I'll recover the next day or the next week, and I'll only be stronger for it later. So that's kind of my thought with mental fitness. I have to go through those tough situations in order for my mind to get stronger. And the second part, like I think my flight usually has they have their things that they go to outside of work. Where a lot of people are working out. That was my last flight. A lot of people love going to the gym afterwards, and de-stressing that way and becoming fit that way and recovering in that way. So, and so much so that we were doing, I won't say every day, but we were doing workouts within the flight during the day. Like every hour, someone would roll a ball and be like, all right, time to do like 20 jumping jacks or 20, burpees or something like that, you know? So keeping it loose in the workplace definitely helped them stay fit more or less and not be as stressed out of work so much. So I got that feedback from my flight chief, and I made sure to keep that going throughout the tour that I had at Altus specifically. That's the most recent one I can think of. So I ensured to keep that going. So even though that wasn't really for everybody, it worked for the majority of the flight. And I did try to tailor things from time to time for the people that needed a different route to do something at work. So yeah, that's pretty much how I handled it.
I love that. That's perfect. I mean, that was really why I put, mental fitness in the title and in the description. It's that ongoing thing, and we're constantly trying to work on it. And so it's so odd to me, the term mental health seems like it's a building, it's a person, it's a thing you go to when you're at your lowest. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for ongoing, challenging. That that answer is awesome. Thank you, Manoj. That's good stuff. Mental fitness,
Nate,
it's always going.
How would you respond to those two questions?
For myself and for the flight, I think for myself, it's to try to slow down. I definitely don't get up early enough to read for an hour that I probably should. I've been going to the human performance section because we have the personal trainer. I'm not going to have that for very long, just in this cool opportunity for the soft community. So I've been trying to go and do that at 7 every morning and get that workout in and start that day. But that's something, I guess hate to repeat, but getting up and, getting the sun in my eyes and working out in the morning, I think is really pivotal. I've tried to do afternoon workouts and things like that. I have to get up and get going, and I think I have too much energy most of the time, so I have to get up and get going. I think that really is a good way. But one thing I have done is I have the Daily Stoic and some of the other books that are kind of like those devotionals where it's broken out by day. And so when I get into the office, I try to put my cat card in and let the thing boot through its system and let the emails load and read a page and kind of take that moment to pause for a second. There's just so much in the world that is faster. We got, fast food. You drive to the window, you're getting a meal in a matter of minutes, and you can Google any answer in the world in a matter of seconds. We've gotten faster and faster with everything, which I think in a lot of aspects is good. But I think that there's a lot of times we need to slow down. One thing I try to do, I don't do it every week. I probably should hold myself to a better standard, but something I saw a previous shirt do is he would print off his calendar at the end of the week, and then he would sit down and take notes and say, like, did I accomplish all the things I wanted to accomplish? And not just that, because I think that's pretty basic, but the final thing he did was, why not? Did I run out of time? Was there a roadblock? Did someone not help me with what I needed? Like, what was the reason? And then he'd make a note for the next week because, I need to elevate that. That's why it didn't go. I ran out of time. I need to prioritize and make more time for that. So that last step of why not is super important. So I try to do that, close the week out. I have an overactive mind, I think, as probably all of us do. So being able to sleep and process things, I need to close down the day and the week. And that really helps me, get to sleep. And there's still sometimes I'm pondering about the flight or, not that I have one currently, but the people and the things I can try to take care of them. But I think closing things up like that is really helpful. Just taking a moment to slow down. And the second part, I don't know. I kind of struggle with that. That's kind of why I asked you guys, because I've had flights that they want more morale. That's like the term they throw around a lot. And I just don't know what that is. I've done free events on behalf of the True North team. They paid for like this giant arcade thing that was all maxed out in Okinawa. It's like 9 stories tall, and there's like everything from, batting cages to arcade to reading manga? Jeez, wow. I clearly don't read comics. And things like that, and relaxing chairs. And so it's this whole building full of things where if you can't find something to do in this building, like I don't know what you do because there's all those different floors, and like half the people didn't show up even though it was free and all those things. So I struggle sometimes. I know people want time off and things like that, but I think with the 4 days and, well, I'm not in DHA right now, but won't go that route. But yeah, it's difficult. I don't know. I think that goes back to the very beginning of what we were talking about is everyone's different. Like some people want time off, some people want public praise, some people want it in private. And so it's tough. I don't know what the perfect answer is to take care of them. I hope, I try to bring up some of the negative things I've been through in my life to try to bridge the gap. And so I hope that, the ability to reach out, because one thing that always bugs me is like the open door policy. We hear it all the time. And I've had commanders that I wouldn't go in and talk to, and not like anything against them in any way. I just never felt like the connection where I could open up and talk about these things that weren't going very well. And so I hope me bringing up some of the things that I've been through will bridge that gap. There has to be structure, chain of command, there has to be respect and things like that. But ultimately, we're all human. So I hope when I say like you can swing by anytime, I literally mean like, anytime, because I've been through some things and been at some low points where I didn't know who to call. And, I felt like if I did call anybody, I'd be bugging them. And so I remember that feeling, and I'll remember that feeling for the rest of my life. So I don't want anybody to ever like be holding the phone in their hand. Like, who do I call? Like, just call me. I'll sit here. We'll listen. I don't have to fix it if you don't want me to fix it, but I'll be there. That was way longer than you wanted.
No, it was really good. And there's one point that I kind of wanted to touch on, because it's something that I think I've observed in some of my assignments as well. And that was, you talked about having, the free activities for folks. And I'm assuming it was on the installation.
No, it was down the road. So I guess maybe the barrier was getting there maybe, but I mean, we tried to facilitate it as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, even I'm just trying to visualize it a little bit, but it feels like, and maybe this is going back to some of Greg's point as well, it feels like a lot of activities, people are more reluctant to participate in them, especially this stuff maybe after hours. The wing here does a First Friday event, and it seems like participation has just dwindled. I mean, it wasn't really like super strong. It kind of comes in waves. But it seems like, I don't know if it's just my interpretation, or it seems like because of the digital age now, people are less, I don't want to say willing, but it seems like they're less, they don't want to spend as much time with the unit. And I understand there's family obligations and there's all sorts of other things that happen outside of that. But I don't know, I feel like a lot of like camaraderie, like you're saying, like how do you build morale? Like doing a lot of that stuff, maybe not not forcing it, but hopefully if it's happening organically, that does kind of help build and raise morale a bit. People kind of fuss about wanting to do it, like, oh my gosh, a mandatory event, but they always seem to wind up have fun while they're there, or, talking about, oh man, we had so much fun. Oh, that was great. We should do that again. It's just like that initial, like getting them to that. But I do wonder like how much the digital age has affected, people wanting to socialize in those ways. Or maybe it's just that there's so much more access to things out in town, in some of the locations. Maybe not all of them. I know I see Manoj making faces at me here. Listen, I did my tour. Okay, I was in Del Rio. Okay,
This is fair. Yep.
It's crazy how times change too, because we were trying to find a game the other day on the Xbox or whatever it was with me and my wife, and we were trying to find a game where we could play together. And all games pretty much are one player on the internet
Single
now.
screen.
Like we used to sit on the couch with 64. All four of us were there, all side by side. So even though we were immersed in a game and that part was fake and whatnot, like the realness, like we were sitting right next to each other. And so that was kind of mind blowing. Like we could not really find a game where we could sit and play together. We ended up, I think, getting Need for Speed, and we switched turns driving the car. But yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how much that plays into that.
Yeah.
So I'll put in a little recommendation. I'm not sure if it's on Xbox or not, but The Adventures of Sackboy is a great 2-person game. And it's a cooperative thing. And
Sackboy.
Anyway, It's fun.
Okay.
I got it to play with the kids, so that we could do something together. And
Okay, I'll jot that down.
I play it on the PS5, but it's anyway. So, Chris, I'd like to go back to your thought, and actually, continuing the conversation because everybody's, I think, brought this up at one point in time or another. Not saying that this is like the answer to your problem, but one way that I would like to encourage people to look at, how do I improve morale in the workplace? And address that conversation is to start with little things. I think I need to improve morale. Let's have a burger burn at 1400 on a Friday. There's too much of a disconnect between where we are currently, which is I don't enjoy being in the workplace more than it takes to earn my paycheck. And I want to socially engage with these same people that I work with in an optional environment where it's not going to affect my paycheck. So I think we could take a lesson from something that Manoj does with the dad joke of the day. It's just, I don't think that you're going into that situation with I'm going to do a dad joke of the day to improve morale in my flight. Maybe not necessarily in such a deliberate way, but it's just like hey, I just want to create a fun office environment that, maybe some people chuckle or groan. Really, any reaction to a dad joke, regardless of what the reaction is a positive reaction.
Yep.
It's important to remember that. But but little things like that are a way, again, to start to build a foundation where people are interacting more. And another example might be like a question of the day or debate of the day. I've seen it with like the change my mind meme guy. And, so that there's a question or like a statement, like that's actually where I pulled that. Would you rather have 2 arms and 1 leg or 1 arm and 2 legs? Question from it was a flight debate. Once upon a time of, which one's better? There was another flight debate that I shared with Chris and Manoj about which way is the best way to make eggs. And, it was just on a whiteboard, and there was like scrambled, hard-boiled, scrambled with cheese, fried eggs, over easy, so on and so forth, all the different varieties of egg making. And it was just like hey, your opinion out there. And then, the people who felt strongly about it, maybe wanted to debate with individuals a little bit, but those are just 2 small examples, not prescriptions like, well, if you get a joke of the day book and a whiteboard where you write questions on it, that's going to fix morale. But I'll tell you what is, those conversations allow us to learn about each other on a little bit deeper level than just the way that we work and the responsibilities that we have from like an office environment. And when we have an opportunity, whether we recognize it consciously or not, to learn more about people, it enriches the relationship. And then, somebody having the idea of, hey, let's go to Finny Friday at the club. If there's a group of people who have more than just work to talk about with each other, because they've developed a richer relationship, that may sound like a more enticing proposition than, hey, the wing commander will buy your first round if you go. Yeah, but it's with people I don't like and talking about things I don't want to talk about. Again, I'm projecting a lot onto those situations, so I don't know that that's necessarily the case. But back to my main point, and just summarize it in one sentence, is try to find small ways to build or sustain those relationships and just focus on the small things. And then the bigger things will come, embrace that snowball effect. And I think you'll see positive results. It just takes time and you have to be patient with it. But I haven't heard a lot of feedback. Sorry to cut you off, Nate. I haven't heard a lot of feedback, having worked with Manoj and interacted with a lot of people who have worked with him and for him, right? I've never heard anyone say that, that he doesn't build a good team, or that, like, oh, well, that's a negative or an unhelpful workplace. It's always positive and, embracing of each other. And that's something that I really aspire to be more like Manoj in that way.
That's good stuff. Yeah, maybe the bridge is too far. That's a good note. Small changes. James Clear, I think you guys did the book on Atomic Habits. So yeah, those small things really add up. That's a good note. I wanted to ask a question to Manoj. He's down to 16 minutes, so let's see if we can get his thoughts before he has to go. You guys are all from completely different ways of life. I think we have a readiness person, health plans, and IT. Is that right? I don't know what Manoj is. Are you health plan?
Well, I guess I'm specializing in RMO now, but yeah, before this.
Oh, now. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
So in this wide range of people in your respective areas of expertise, what do you think the most common misconception about mental health is, and how do we combat that? Starting with Manoj, the biggest misconception with mental fitness.
I mean, I hate to just echo what you said. I want my own answer, but I still like what you said. It's like, you said like something about, mental health seems to be it's like where you go when everything is just gone wrong. And like, I don't, and it's framed like that and has that stigma still, I know we're trying to get rid of that stigma. I totally understand that. I hope it does go away eventually, but like, it shouldn't be like, oh, when everything has just gone wrong. It should just be kind of that daily thing we do. I won't say as common as breathing, but it just needs to be that. It needs to be as common. I mean, like, if I come off as someone who, feels like I got my mental fitness done, I'm strong up there, I've been put through situations and I've come out on top. Like, no, that's not always the facts. Like, I've gone to B-Hop many times and talked to them because I just had to get stuff off my chest. I needed some direction, and it's helped. So it's not like there's if you ask for help, you're now weak. I hate that. Like, I mean, I love always asking help, and then I love it when people ask me for help. I mean, it's just a normal thing we should be doing. I feel like just on an everyday basis. Like, it shouldn't be come off as, oh, I'm dumb now, I don't know the answer. Like, I need to now ask for help, and it's going to make me look weak and stupid, and I won't get the strat now or something like that. Like, I'm going to ask for help whenever I need it. So, and it's just a common thing. I think we all could use it once in a while. And even if it's just confirming what we may already know or not know, just ask. Like, I don't think it should be taken as now, oh, I'm smarter than the other person because I knew that answer and they didn't. So, like, I think, like, just that aspect of it, of kind of getting out of our own head is a big step that I feel like for me, I needed to take to make sure I had that strong mental fitness, So, but, having, like I said before, just having those experiences that get me there. It's not like I had this epiphany when I was like 20 and I'm good to go. It's come with experience, both previously before and personal life before getting in the Air Force. And it's even been tested way more since joining the Air Force, and I don't think I would have gotten this experience in the previous job that I had before joining. Like, I think I'd be, I won't say coasting, but I don't think I'd be put in the same situations that I've been put in now in this job. So having been through that has just absolutely made me stronger, and I can't thank anyone else for that. Like it's been a huge gain for me.
Yeah, I hope as we keep using that term, it'll just be more and more normal, because I always think it's funny, and I try to use the analogy or the picture of, like, can you imagine you just like jump on the treadmill one time and you run real fast, like, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I never have to work out again. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's,
why can't we just relate it over?
And it got me thinking a little bit the other day when I was like, it is become more and more common to kind of open up about mental health, which has been awesome. But on the downside, there's been like less and less availability for those appointments now. And it's like, oh man, we went a little too far. Now we got to make sure our workforce in that area is definitely there, because I know a lot of people are struggling to get those appointments and stuff. I hope you talk about that balance thing. I hope it balances the other way eventually too, so we have resources. I know resources are always coming up each and every day, new ones, telehealth, and just pick up an app now and put in a question, and you have someone like reaching back out to you, which is pretty awesome. So just making it as common as possible is a huge way forward. And that's it. Okay.
Is that a question just for Manoj, or are we all going? Are we taking turns?
Oh, everybody, sorry.
No, you're good. All right. On the readiness side, I'll approach it from a medical planner standpoint. I think one misconception in the community, or not necessarily within the medical readiness, medical planning community, but just in the world that we work in, is that clinical mental health is the only measure of effectiveness or measure of performance that matters for like deployed mental health, behavioral health resources. Well, we're sending a social worker and a psychologist to a deployed location, but they only saw 7 clinical visits. So we're not getting our value out of that deployment. So we're going to cut it for future rotations. As an example, is like, that's a misconception narrative. I think, there's so much that can be done, and Manoj hit on it, several of the options. There's so much that can be done prior to, a clinical and outpatient mental health visit to, put things in the bud, so to speak, or move to the left of the bang, depending on, pick your analogy, right? To get ahead of a problem before it becomes a clinical problem. And there's also an incentive for the member, right, who's seeking help, to seek that help early, and because it changes like the documentation requirements, and there's a stigma, but there's also real effects on, like if you have a clearance, or if you're in a special program like PRAP or other things that, if you're being seen by mental health, there's an evaluation that has to happen, or a decision made about your fitness for duty. This is speaking in generics. It's not, every case is different, and I don't know enough about all of them. So just a little caveat, but the, being able to do outreach or preventative care to stem something before it becomes a problem, right, keeps a lot of that off of the record, and a lot of that to where like it doesn't require a competency evaluation, or a security investigation or things like that, because you're seeking things out as a preventative measure versus, I am diagnosed with clinical X problem, can be treated very differently. And so, outreach and BHOP and, your primary care, behavioral health, PCBH, those are all ways in which those people contribute value in the deployed environment, but it's rarely captured in the same way or looked at in the same way by leadership who's looking at, like expending resources for deployed missions. No business is good business when it comes to mental health and at least clinical mental health visits.
So I think I'll punctuate some of what Manoj said. I really think it's important that we talk about the stigma because it does still exist. And I think in some ways it will always exist. But the more that we work to sort of normalize the fact that, I view mental health and some of the stuff surrounding mental health as, I don't want to say a spectrum, but more of like a seasonal thing, right? Life comes in seasons. And so there'll be times where we're going to need, like you said, you can't train for a marathon by jumping on a treadmill once, right? When things are coming at you and they're heavy in life, right? We're going to need more help and resources than when things aren't going in that way. And so I think normalizing that a little bit, and I think things like your podcast do that. Getting more people to talk about it openly, share their experiences. I do think that helps normalize it a bit. As far as mental health relating to IT, I think I'm going to be generalizing a little bit, but one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I'm generalizing, I don't think this applies universally to every single person that works in IT, but it seems that imposter syndrome is prevalent for IT professionals. I've thought a lot about this and maybe the reasons why it's like this, but really the best I can kind of come up with is it seems like we're expected to know everything. Like we are 100% looked at as experts in all things IT. And I'll give a simple example, right? A meeting will be taking place and all of a sudden a projector will stop working or the computer will freeze up. And they immediately look for like the computer person in the room and like, hey, fix this. Like that's usually like, fix this. And, there's a problem, and it may be a simple problem, but it may not be. But I think like that need to have those things fixed immediately, right? Because we rely so heavily on technology, and that need to like know, like, hey, I'm the system administrator, I'm the network engineer, I'm the cyber guy. I have to know exactly what to do and when to do it. I think that kind of feeds into some of that imposter syndrome. And it's, when you have a systems administrator who's been doing the job for 5 years sitting next to somebody who's been doing the job for 30 years, right? The person that's only been doing it for 5 years may feel like, dang, this person's going to find me out. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Rather than, sharing information, having maybe more of an open and collaborative environment. I don't know that that's always been the norm in IT, but it feels like we're starting to get there. And it's something I tried to cultivate within my sections to help try to reduce some of the anxiety and stress around some of that imposter syndrome. I hope that kind of answers the intent of what you were looking for.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for coming out. We'll get Manoj out with a whopping 4 minutes left, but I thank you all for coming on the show. I encourage listeners to share their thoughts on social media. I got the Facebook. This will be up on Buzzsprout. Trying to get out to TikTok. I'm old, almost 40, so I'm trying to figure out all these social media sites. Trying our best, but I'll try and get some clips up. I love you all. See ya.